They say power is not only in what you give, but also in what you refuse. The moment you stop being endlessly available to everyone, something in the world shifts. It feels as if the axis of your life suddenly tilts, and people begin to treat you with a strange new respect. Carl Jung once observed that people are often enslaved by their unconscious need to please others. This hidden compulsion makes them overextend, overgive, and overcommit, leaving them drained. But when the cycle is broken, when availability ends, transformation begins. Think about the friend who always answers every call, attends every gathering, and says yes to every request. At first, people love this friend, but eventually they begin to take him for granted. His generosity turns invisible because it costs nothing to receive it. Now imagine the same friend suddenly drawing boundaries and no longer rushing to meet every demand. He doesn't pick up the phone every time, doesn't say yes to every favor, and doesn't bend himself out of shape. Within days, people feel a different gravity around him. That is the paradox of human psychology. Abundance breeds neglect, while scarcity breeds value. When you are everywhere, your presence means little. But when you withdraw, even slightly, your absence becomes louder than your words. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires separation. You cannot grow if you are always dissolving yourself into others. You cannot find depth if your time is forever consumed by shallow demands. Availability is often disguised as kindness, but underneath it can be a mask of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being disliked, and fear of losing love if you ever dare to say no. But the truth is, over-availability makes love weaker, not stronger. People unconsciously test how far they can stretch your boundaries before you resist. If you offer endless access, they assume your time has no worth. And once something has no worth, it is quietly discarded in their minds. So what happens when you stop being available to everyone all the time? At first, there is confusion. People wonder what changed and why you are not the same. Then there is resistance. They test you, push against your silence, and try to restore the old pattern. But if you remain consistent, something remarkable begins to unfold around you. They start to respect your time, your presence, and your energy in ways they never did before. You no longer exist as an endless fountain, you exist as a source with depth and mystery. Carl Jung often spoke of the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves that we bury to maintain acceptance. Over-availability is often a shadow trait. We hide our resentment, our exhaustion, and our anger just to keep serving. But the more we repress this shadow, the more it leaks out in subtle bitterness. Withdrawing your availability is not about cruelty, but about integration of the self. It is about allowing your shadow to speak and admitting, I need rest, I need space. I deserve to choose. And in choosing, you reclaim yourself from the prison of endless service. The first stage of this transformation is always discomfort and unease. You may feel guilty for saying no, anxious when you don't reply, and restless when you don't show up. But that discomfort is the necessary labor of your rebirth into a more authentic self. Boundaries are the skeleton of identity, the invisible frame that holds your being upright. Without them, you are a shapeless being, bending into whatever form others demand. With them, you stand tall, and others must walk around your presence rather than through it. Think of the great leaders, thinkers, and creators who shaped history with their work. They were not endlessly available to the whims and noise of everyone around them. They created sacred distance around themselves, and that distance made their presence powerful. Jung's insight was that individuation always requires solitude and separation. When you stop scattering your energy into everyone else's lives, you have energy left to dive inward. You discover that the most important availability is not to others, but to your own soul. Society often pressures you to be accessible at all times, to answer instantly, respond instantly, and show up instantly. Technology has magnified this demand, turning people into slaves of notifications and endless messages. But the cost of this constant availability is the quiet death of depth. When you unplug, when you step back, when you are not instantly reachable, something miraculous happens. You recover silence, you recover stillness, and you recover the lost dialogue with your own unconscious. And in that dialogue, you meet yourself again as if for the first time. The world does not reward over-availability, it exploits it without mercy. Employers will demand more, friends will expect more, and family will assume more without noticing your exhaustion. But when you begin to withdraw, they are forced to see your worth, and value replaces exploitation. This is why Jung warned that individuation is often lonely in its earliest stages. When you stop being the yes person, people who depended on your weakness may drift away in search of another. But those who remain will see you not as a resource, but as a human being. This shift is not only external in how others treat you, but internal in how you feel. Your energy begins to return in waves, your focus sharpens with clarity, and your creativity awakens again. By not being available to everyone, you make yourself available to life itself. Consider relationships, where the lesson is especially clear and visible. A partner who is constantly available often loses the spark of attraction and desire. Desire thrives on mystery, and mystery is born of space and distance. When you stop being immediately available, you give the relationship oxygen and life. You create room for longing, curiosity, and appreciation to grow again between two souls. Without scarcity, there can be no true value in love or in passion. The same is true for friendships and bonds of loyalty. If you are always the one reaching out and always the one showing up, your efforts becomes invisible. But when you step back, those who truly value you will step forward and meet you halfway. Jung understood this as the balancing of archetypes within the human psyche. The caregiver archetype is noble and compassionate, but when it dominates, it suffocates the self. The warrior archetype must rise to set limits, defend space, and demand respect. Stopping your availability is the rise of the inner warrior within your being. It is not aggression or cruelty, but a gentle act of assertion and clarity. It is not rejection of others, but reclamation of your own sacred ground. The culture of constant availability breeds burnout and resentment. It breeds fatigue, hidden anger, and the quiet death of joy. But the culture of boundaries breeds respect, balance, and the birth of inner strength. When you withdraw from being endlessly present, you step into sacred absence, and in that absence, your presence becomes 10 times more powerful and unforgettable. People notice when you return because your energy is rare, and rarity commands attention. The journey is not about becoming selfish, but about becoming whole again. For Jung, wholeness meant bringing together all parts of the self, even those we neglect or hide. By saying no to the world, you are saying yes to the hidden depths within yourself. And those depths hold treasures that you cannot yet imagine waiting in silence. Creativity, intuition, wisdom, and strength all live in the quiet you reclaim for yourself. To stop being available is to open the door to the kingdom of your own unconscious. So the question becomes simple and profound. How do you begin this journey? The answer is not in dramatic, grand gestures, but in consistent and deliberate small acts. A delayed reply, a polite no, or a moment of silence before you commit can change everything. Each act plants a seed of self-respect in the soil of your spirit. And over time, that seed grows into an unshakable tree of boundaries rooted in dignity. A tree under which you can rest, and others must approach with reverence and respect. This is the beginning of the transformation that shifts your entire life. The moment you stop being endlessly available, the world notices you with new eyes. And more importantly, you finally notice yourself. When you stop being endlessly available, you initiate an invisible shift in how people experience you. They can no longer treat you as an endless supply of energy and attention. Instead, they must measure the value of your presence more carefully. Carl Jung noted that human beings project their needs onto others unconsciously. If you are always present, they unconsciously believe you exist to fulfill their desires. When you withdraw, their projection collapses and they are forced to see you as an individual. This is where respect begins to grow. Respect is not born from constant presence, but from limitation and balance. When people cannot predict or control your availability, they are compelled to value it. Think of gold. It is not valued because it is everywhere, but because it is rare. Your presence, when limited by healthy boundaries, begins to resemble that same rare quality. Scarcity awakens appreciation, and appreciation awakens respect. The unconscious mind is always scanning for what is abundant and what is scarce. Abundance is assumed as cheap, while scarcity signals worth. This principle applies not only to objects, but also to human relationships. Jung's work reminds us that relationships are not only social, but deeply psychological. People respond to your availability not by logic, but by instinct. They feel your boundaries before they understand them. When you stop answering instantly, others feel the gap in their unconscious. At first, it may irritate or confuse them, but slowly they realize something deeper. That gap signals that your time is no longer free, it is precious. This realization forces people to pause and consider how they approach you. They weigh their words more carefully, they value your time more deeply, and they respect your presence more sincerely. Your energy becomes a privilege, not a guarantee. It is important to note that this change does not come without resistance. Some people will push harder, expecting you to return to the old pattern of endless service. Their frustration is not proof you are wrong, but proof you are changing. Jung warned that the collective often resists the individual's growth. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will resist your transformation the most. But this resistance is evidence that your boundary setting is working. The unconscious does not want change, because change requires adaptation. Yet adaptation is exactly what creates respect. By standing firm, you force others to adapt to the new you. Your silence begins to speak louder than your words. A delayed response communicates more than an instant yes. A quiet absence in a room can carry more weight than constant chatter. This is why Jung emphasized the power of the unconscious in communication. Much of what you express is not in words but in presence. And presence grows heavier, more meaningful, when it is not constantly diluted. Consider the difference between a mentor who is always available and one who is selective. The always available mentor becomes ordinary, their wisdom expected and consumed without gratitude. The selective mentor is remembered forever because each moment with them feels sacred. Your availability shapes how others store you in their memory. If you are always there, you blend into the background like wallpaper. If you appear selectively, you stand out like art on a blank wall. This shift in perception does not only affect relationships with others, it also rewires the relationship you have with yourself. By limiting your availability, you declare to yourself, my time matters, my energy matters, my life matters. Self-respect is the foundation upon which all outer respect is built. You cannot demand from others what you deny yourself. If you treat your time as worthless, others will do the same. The unconscious mirrors this back to you constantly. The way people treat you is often a reflection of how you treat yourself. Withdraw your over-availability and you will see your self-image mirrored back as more valuable. But this transition is not easy because guilt often poisons the process. The moment you decline a request or take time for yourself, guilt whispers in your ear. It says you are selfish, unkind, or even unlovable. Jung would say this guilt comes from the collective shadow, the weight of cultural conditioning. Many cultures idealize self-sacrifice, obedience, and endless service. To break that mold feels dangerous, as if you are betraying an ancient law. Yet true growth always begins with discomfort. Guilt is simply the echo of old programming. As you sustain your boundaries, guilt fades, and in its place comes a calm strength. This strength is not loud or aggressive, it is quiet and steady. It is the confidence that comes from living in alignment with your true self. Jung called this process individuation, the gradual birth of the authentic self. In individuation, you shed the masks that society forced upon you. Over-availability is one such mask, the mask of the people-pleaser, the ever-giving servant. Removing it allows your true face to emerge, and that face is not cruel or selfish, it is whole. Wholeness does not mean endless giving, it means balance. It means knowing when to serve and when to step back. Relationships built on endless availability are fragile. They are fragile because they depend on your weakness. Once you stop overgiving, they collapse under the weight of imbalance. But relationships built on respect are unshakable. They survive the storm of boundaries because they were never based on exploitation. They grow stronger when you assert your independence. This is why stepping back is also a test. It reveals who values you for who you are and who values you for what you give. Those who vanish at your no were never truly with you in the first place. Though painful, This revelation is liberating. It frees you from the illusion of false friendships and hollow connections. It clears space for relationships that honor your presence. Space is the secret ingredient that makes love and respect flourish. Constant availability suffocates space, leaving no room for appreciation. Limited availability allows appreciation to breathe and grow. Even in creativity, this principle applies. Artists who constantly give without pause burn out, their work losing depth. But those who step back, reflect, and withdraw return with creations that astonish. Silence is as important as sound, and absence is as important as presence. Without contrast, life becomes flat and meaningless. Boundaries create contrast, and contrast creates beauty. Jung believed the psyche needs this rhythm of giving and withdrawing. Too much of either leads to imbalance. The soul requires cycles of engagement and retreat to stay whole. Stopping your availability is, therefore, not an act of selfishness, but of rhythm. It is the restoration of natural cycles to a life that has been hijacked by constant demands. It is the return of ebb and flow to your spirit. As you live this rhythm, you begin to feel lighter. The constant pressure of obligation falls away. In its place, you find space for rest, reflection, and renewal. Others may call you distant, detached, or even cold at first. But these are projections of their own discomfort with your strength. Over time, even they will adapt to your new balance. The more you practice this, the more power returns to you. Not the power of domination, but the power of self-possession. The power of knowing you are the master of your own time. And with this power, your presence changes. People sense it when you walk into a room. They sense that you are no longer desperate for approval, no longer enslaved to their demands. That is when they treat you differently, when they pause, when they listen, when they respect. Because they know your attention is not free anymore, it is earned. This is the paradox Jung understood so deeply. By withdrawing from others, you draw them closer. By refusing constant availability, you awaken their desire for your presence. By valuing yourself, you teach others to value you. The silent shift has begun, and in this silence, everything in your life slowly changes. When you stop being available, something profound happens in the silent spaces you create. People begin to confront themselves because without your constant presence, they no longer have a mirror that validates their needs. This absence reveals the truth. Your availability had been a shield for them to avoid their own emptiness. Carl Jung believed that withdrawal is not a sign of weakness, but of inner transformation. By pulling back, you disrupt the patterns that others rely on without ever questioning. The moment you stop filling the silence for them, they are forced to hear the echoes of their own neglected thoughts. Relationships, in their purest form, should flow like rivers, mutual, reciprocal, alive. But when one person is always available, the balance collapses into a stagnant pool of dependence. Jung would call this an unconscious dynamic, where one person sacrifices their individuality to maintain harmony. When you become less available, you awaken others from their unconscious reliance. They begin to realize how much of their stability was borrowed from your consistency. The cracks in their own character, which you once covered with your availability, now rise to the surface. This is why detachment is often met with resistance. People accuse you of being cold, distant, or selfish. But beneath their words lies a hidden fear. They are no longer able to lean on you as their unshakable pillar, and now they must confront their own fragility. Jung emphasized that growth comes only through discomfort. Your absence introduces that discomfort, but it also plants the seed of transformation.